Okay, we go to the third topic that we are discussing in the afternoon series, which is Bitul, Isur, Lekhatchila. We'll go through, again in short, the Kudus which are relevant to this topic and how it's practiced Lamaisa, how it's relevant to kashrus industry, which is pretty much what this series is about. In the book that I gave you Shulchan Aruch, some Alter Rebbe's and some Tzedek, and I'm just going to go through what comes out from each one. Summarize the important points of each one. The Shulchan Aruch in Yeridei Siman Tzadik Tes, which everybody learned more than once. Sif Hey, Vav, Zayin is where it discusses the dinim of Bitul, Isur, Lekhatchila. Shulchan Aruch opens up by saying, Ein mevatel Isur Lekhatchila. First rule, Bitul Isur Lekhatchila, you're not allowed to do. When is yes, Taz right away points out to you, if your kavana is to do something else, for example with the honey, then it's mutter. And also, Sheyef should be in acher. Two conditions. First of all, if your kavana is to do something else, and second of all, that you can't do it any other way. The Shach points out, if you want to discuss the issue of Bitul Isur Lekhatchila, there is a machlokes Rishonim, pretty much. The Teres Abayis to the Rashba discusses all the shittas. Some say that it's most people say it's the Rabbanon. According to the Ravid, it's Asur Min HaTorah. And even according to the Ravid, but the Eved would be mutter. Teres Abayis in his Maskana, Teres Abayis HaOrech and a Kotzer, in the HaOrech, and you see in the Kotzer, in the Maskana, gives you three rules about Bitul Isur. If it's Isur Deraisa, then whether, means we're talking about the Mashmos of the Rashba is that the idea of Bitul Isur is only Asur Midrabanan. But when does it apply? So if it's Isur Deraisa, then regardless of where it fell into, whether it fell into something which is Mevatalat Mideraisa or something which is not Mevatalat Mideraisa, means Mevatalat, some things are Batal Mideraisa but not Miderabanan. The Shishim is Miderabanan. So then, if it's less than the shear, so it's not batal, even midrabanan, you can't add to it more. You can't use your hands to mix more to it. And if you did it, b'sheg it's mutter, b'meized it's asur for you, and it's asur for anybody that you did it for. Isur derabanan, which has a base in Torah. For example, he uses the example of Gvinas Akum, that the chashash is that they're ma'arav and it's something tomei, so it becomes a shaila of a deiraisa, but it's a gzeira of chachamim. So Lekhatchila also ein ma'aravin, you're not allowed to mix to mevatel, but if it fell by itself, then you could add to it to be mevatel it. Isur midrabanan, completely midrabanan, that has no ikr b'deraisa, then Lekhatchila would seem that you could be ma'arif. But the shit of Rabbi Shimshon is that you're not allowed to do it, and yesh lachush l'divrei ha'machmirim ha'locha l'maisa. That's how he paskins. So there is this machlokes of whether Bitul Isur is an issue mideraisa or issue midrabanan. It does have certain nafkaminas that come through later, especially when you have certain sveikas or certain things. If the Isur is deraisa or derabanan, and Tzemach Tzedek that you have in Piskei Dinim, very short paragraph on Yeridei Siman Tzadik Tes Sif Zayin over there, which we didn't get to that Sif, but Tzemach Tzedek, because it's relevant to here, I'm going to mention it. Over there, the Shulchan Aruch says that if a little bit of Isur got absorbed into a pot, and that pot usually uses a lot of heter, you're allowed to Lekhatchila use it. The Taz goes the whole 2 long pages to explain to you why it's Asur, argues on the Shulchan Aruch. The Pri Chodosh is matir. The Tzemach Tzedek says the Yesod of the Machlokes clearly is whether you hold that bitul isur is deraisa or bitul isur is derabanan. And the Tzemach Tzedek concludes in this lashon, "V'teima labach v'ataz." I'm surprised that they gishu, they didn't realize that Tosfos paskins clearly that it's mutter, that's mutter, and it seems over there that he takes the position that it is the Rabbanon, not the Eraisa. But let's continue about what's the rule. Let's go back a second. We said before that the Taz says that there's two conditions when you're allowed to be mevatel isur lekhatchila, if ein kavanasi lekach, if your kavanah is for something else, and if ef shel b'ofen acher. There is a shitta which is machmir. The Maram of Rothenburg is machmir even if you did not ein miskaven. However, the Alter Rebbe, which is the first Alter Rebbe you have in your booklet, the Siman Taf Mem Beis, if hey, he's talking about bitul chametz on Pesach. His lashon is לכתחילה os levat chametz b'shishim kodem Pesach v'miskaven kedei la'oichle b'seich Pesach mipnei shekum levat la'isur b'yadayim. And the Kontesachin over there, he brings the shittis which hold that if your kavanah is to do something else, it's mutter. And he says, even though the Maram of Rothenburg holds that even be'enim miskaven, it's asur l'kaimolon kavosei, we don't hold like the Maram of Rothenburg. The Alter Rebbe goes based on like the Taz, that as long as kavanah to do something else, your kavanah to do something else, and the kavanah is not to be mevatel the isur, and then it's fine. We'll soon see that you want to have this isur inside your food. That means mechaven levatel isur. You need it for something else, like by the honey. When you have the things in the honey, and you do it, then it's not a problem because your kavanah is to clear the honey, whatever it is. We'll soon see an example of that. It's Tzemach Tzedek regarding the sugar. Processing. Now, what happens if you do it with your hands? That you have the next Alter Rebbe in also Chespe. For you, it's usher for you. Who else does that include? That you'll see in Alter Rebbe, next Alter Rebbe in Simulation on Gimel, in Shabbos, regarding somebody who put a pot back on the fire in a place where he is not allowed to put it back. So the Alter Rebbe over there writes, Mitztamek v'yofel, he says, Hechzer over v'hechzer, Reishon Gimel Sifchav Daled, the Hechzer b'Shabbos amokim she'asur l'hachzer shama divrei hakoil, ben b'shoigig ben b'meizid, is also the Mitzvah Shabbos ch'dei she'yasu. When is this? Mitztamek v'yofel. From Mitztamek v'aloi, some people, it's muter afilu boy bayoim, and there are people who have a suffix, yesh mistapkin. Yesh mistapkin afilu b'mitztamek v'yofel, if you b'chlal could be oiser b'di'evet. Because already in Vushal Kol Tzarkin, it says, it's enough to rely on this, and mitztamek v'yofel, and this shitta, which is mekel. You can rely on them to be matter for other people by bayim. But mikomokim livnei veisoy ein lehatir shegam b'shvilam huchzar. When you put it back in onto the pot, you did it. You're going to think you did it for yourself. Gam livnei beisoy, they're included in you. Bnei beis is the same as you. Same thing is also in Chas Yom Tov. Siman Tov Kuf Gimel Sif Yud Beis. Also over there it says that the macholim alolu asur loy ulechol anshe beisay la'olam, things that were done be'isur b'meizid. And the Kuntra Sachan over there right away points out to you that the mashmos of the Mogen Avram, the Lashon that Alter Rebbe uses, the Mishnah is mashal b'shviloi ein dina ka'acherim el keloi be'atzmoi. Means if you cook for somebody else, it's as if he's doing it for himself. Vehu hadin la'anshe beisay. Same thing applies to anshe beisay.
If you cook it for someone else,
No, if I cook it in mind for somebody else, I do something wrong for somebody else, it's also for him. If I do it for myself, it's also for me and for my family. If I do it for somebody else, it's also for him and for his family. Bnei Beisai is ki'ilu he by himself. The same thing you see in Hilchas Shabbos, you see in Hilchas Yom Tov, and then you see it also in Hilchas Pesach. Siman Tafim Zayin, Sif Samach Aleph, about him Irvoi Ova V'Irvoi B'Meizid. Over here, the Alter Rebbe explains what b'meizid means. So then, from that, you understand what b'shoigeg is. The Alter Rebbe says, "B'meizid hainu sheyoda she'osur la'arvoi." Meizid means you know that you're not allowed to do it. Shoigeg obviously means that you didn't know you're not allowed to do it. Not that you mixed it without knowing. Next one is Taf Mem Zayin Seif Samachal. If you have them all in your booklet in order. And then like every other bitul isur b'meizid she'asur loy ule anshe beisay. It's also for him and for his family. U'mutar la'acherim. And that's also mashma, the same thing from the Taz over here in Siman Tzadik Test. It means when you say asur loy, family is included in loy. Both. If you do it for somebody, his family is included. You can't separate the head of the household from the family. And then the Ramah says also that you're not allowed to sell it to somebody else. So there shouldn't be hanoeh from what you're mevatel. The next sivov, the Mechaber says that if it's isur derabanan, the Mechaber says ein ma'arvin oisoi biyodayim kedei levatloi. We also came b'meizid asur. If it's Isur D'Rabbanan, the Mechaber holds that you could L'Chatchila go ahead and add onto it. The Ramah is Machmer. The Ramah says, Yeshem de'en levatel Isur D'Rabbanan le'hoisifol kom be'Isur D'Raisa v'chein negem v'en l'shanes. That's the Ramah. The Taz also goes over here into a whole long arichis, brings the Marshal that really, the ikr is like the Rashba that we saw in Teres Abayis Arich. When it comes to Isur D'Rabbanan, you do not have to, if it fell already, you could be moisif on it to be mevatel it. Not that you could L'Chatchila mevatel Isur, but Isur D'Rabbanan. Then you are allowed to add to it. That's how the Taz paskins. Now, Alter Rebbe, if you look in Hilchas Yom Tov Tav Kuf Zayin Sif Gimel, in the Kuntra Sachan, it's mashma that he follows the Ramah and not the Taz. That is, in short, first the Sefer. So we have Bitul Isur L'Chatchila is taking something which is Asur, intentionally putting into something which is Mutter, or it fell by mistake and you want to add more onto it, it's Asur. The Ramah says there's no difference between the Rais and the Rabbanon. What's the definition of Mevatel Isur L'Chatchila? We see that first of all, you have to have kavanah to be Mevatel the Isur. If your kavanah is for something else, it's not a problem. Also, if Ef Shabbai Fenacher, there's no other way of achieving the same result without it. If you do it Beyodayim, it's the same thing as Miskav and Mevatel. There's no difference. If you do it Beyodayim, same thing as doing it. There's no difference whether you do it for yourself. It's also for you and for your family. You do it for somebody else. B'meizid, obviously, it's also for them. And B'nei Beisas are always included in the person that it's done for. Now, where does this apply? Before we go into Tzemach Tzedek, which gives you a practical scenario, which today is much more common, not the Tzemach Tzedek scenario, but similar scenarios. When you have certain products that there is no way of doing them in a heter dika fashion, sometimes there will be bitulim that are done. Certain bitulim. Oh, rely on the guy doing it, we're going to get to the guy din soon, etc. But those are things that the question is, who is it being done for and how it's being done. The bitul isur concept is what's לכתחילה asur. Even then, there are quite a few scenarios where it will be mutter, as long as it's not done biyadayim, and the kavanah is for something else. So, but if the kavanah is to have this treif thing inside it, then you have a problem. Now you have a tzemach tzedek. There's 4 tshuvas of the tzemach tzedek in a row, not in a row, 2 in the beginning of the tshuvas and 2 in the isofis, which are discussing a scenario. How would they do sugar back in the day? They would, the sugar today is also in America is also made from, a lot of it is made from sugar beets. Over there in Russia it was done the same way. It was made from beets. And they would cook it, they would juice it, they would cook it. But now you have a problem. It's full of, the beets have fiber and all the other things, you have to separate it. They would put blood into the sugar mix. And then the blood would, when it boils, the blood would absorb all the dirt, all the stuff would sink to the bottom, and the sugar juice would float to the top. You take off the sugar juice, you dry it, and you, or whatever, whichever way you process it, and you have sugar. So the blood was used as a processing agent.
No other way.
Then, no. The Tzemach Tzedek mentions that I forgot where it was, that there's one place where since they made it from honey, they were able to get away with it. They didn't need to use the blood. How much blood would they use? On average, it was 2 to 100. 1 out of 50, so there's no shishim. So, there is a tshuva of the Tzemach Tzedek, Siman Samach Zayin. You have it in your booklet, it's in your desk, Siman Samach Zayin. He goes into finding a way to be matir. It's a long, interesting tshuva. There's different aspects to it. The main focus that I'm going to focus on is mevatel isur לכתחילה, because that's what we're discussing now in the shiur. But it's also important to understand the rest of the heterim, because they're all relevant in this scenario either. In this scenario also. Now, the Tzemach Tzedek begins in discussing the concept of adding. They would add salt to. They would add blood to process for processing salt. That's already mentioned in Tosfos. And it's discussed that it's mutter. And the shaila is why. Why is adding blood to salt and then afterwards getting rid of it is mutter? The Tzemach Tzedek goes, says there's 2 ways of looking at it. Either because it's nice and tam nefgam, or because at the processing afterwards they bake it, they whatever it is, and the blood completely disappears. It's kolel legamre, nisraf kolel legamre. So Tzemach seems to take that the reason of tam nefgam is not a good enough reason. It's really ikra heter is because kolel legamre. So Tzemach then goes into a separate thing. Okay, let's say that that's the heter. We have a different problem. Being that the only way to produce this sugar or the salt is by using the blood as a processing agent, maybe it's a davar hamaimed. Why? Because that is what caused it, is a processing agent considered a davar hamaimed. Also an important shaila. We all know davar hamaimed usually means something which takes something, makes it strong, makes it hard. But over here is the blood that makes this sugar. Without the blood, you're not going to be able to get the proper sugar, separate, filter it properly. Is it considered a davar hamaimed or not? Now, this davar hamaimed is not nice and tam. Blood has no taste. Or maybe it has taste, but it has a bad taste. Yeah, so maybe it's nice and tam. Maybe it's not nice and tam. If it is nice and tam, it's nice and tam nefgam. Yeah, so there is a shitta, the Menachem Azari of Pano, that you are as davar hamaimed, even if it doesn't give any tam, we're still machmir. Tzemach Tzedek says he's a das yochid, and he's against all the other rishonim. You don't have to follow that shitta. Then Tzemach Tzedek says be'etzem, blood is not a davar hamaimed. The fact that it's a processing agent is not a davar hamaimed. All it does is it gives you a benefit. It whitens, it clarifies the sugar. It doesn't create the sugar. More so, that's the reason why it shouldn't be davar hamaimed, there should be batel. More so, The guy who's processing the sugar, dafka does not want the taste of blood and sugar. Definitely doesn't want the color of blood and sugar. Want white sugar, or close to white sugar, tasting like sugar. You're not interested in having taste of blood in the sugar. So the fact that that happens, your kavanah is the other way around. Right, so but then Tafsek says regardless, even if it would be a davar ha'maimid, it would still be batel because it does not give tam. Then Tzemach Tzedek goes in his Gimel and says, well, we have a problem. You want to use all these things that you want to use from the salt. The proof from the salt doesn't work over here because the proof of the salt over there was much less, a much smaller amount. It was batel, b'shishim, or much more than shishim. Over here, it's 1 out of 50. It's not batel b'shishim. So how? There's no bittul. You don't have an issue. You don't have a problem. You don't have the nois and tam lefgam because blood doesn't give taste. It's not burnt and disappeared like by the salt because in the sugar you're not baking it. All you're doing is you're boiling it, so the blood stays there. So you don't have anything that's similar to salt. So then Tzemach Tzedek says, you know what? Because we're dealing with, he says over here, there is no nois and tam. Why? For a different reason. We don't have to look at 60 b'chlal. If you would give this to Akfela, he would taste it, a goy should cook, he would tell you sugar is sugar is sugar. Tastes the same. You don't have a problem with it. Sugar that got boiled with blood tastes like sugar. Sugar that got boiled without blood tastes like sugar. There's no difference in taste. So the fact that he would not be able to tell any difference. So obviously, even if it's less than 1 to 50, it would still be fine. Why? Because in such a scenario, you would rely on the kfela. In this scenario, when there's no tam, you taste it and it tastes the same, you could rely on the goy. You could rely on the kfela. You don't need 60. Huh? That's the Ramah Mechaber over there, if you could ask a yid in such a scenario. Huh? Say. Why you ask a yid? You can't have a yid taste to see if a kfela.
That's right.
No. I'm saying Mechaber Ramah. Huh?
You can't ask a Sfardi unless it's something that they hold on properly. Or that, because Davar also
you can't ask them, yeah. Then Tzemach Tzedek comes and says, well, you know what, you solve this, good, now I have a different problem. Something which is not nois and tam l'shvach, and not nois and tam l'fgam, it's mashma from the Ramah that it's asur, because you have no way of determining the bittul of it. So over here, you have that problem. More so, over here, you can't say there was nois tam l'fgam, nois tam l'shvach. You don't know what it did. You know that you put in beets, you cooked them, you put in blood, sugar came out. Taste of sugar doesn't taste like beets, doesn't taste like blood. It's a new taste. Maybe the new taste is a result of the blood. Maybe, we don't know. If that's the case, you need 60 against the blood. Because if you don't know what generated the new taste of blood, you have a problem. Then Tzemach Tzedek says, no, even that's not a problem, and it's daled because the dam be'etzim is batel, because the dam itself has no taste. And whatever taste the blood would have, you could see that it's not felt bichlal in the sugar. And even if you would say that that is what brings about the taste, the new taste of sugar that causes it, really you could rely over here on batel b'roiv due to the fact of this tam.
So does that taste? We said before, doesn't add any taste.
It doesn't add taste, but we don't know if it generates a new taste. It says that the blood doesn't give taste to this mixture. The fact that it generates a new taste, you could say that maybe it's batel b'roiv. And he concludes, and when I say, and I'm skipping to the last two, he says, but look at it this way. You put in 2 to 1 out of 50 of blood into the sugar, but you're using it as a processing agent. What happens afterwards? This blood absorbs all the dirt. It sinks to the bottom. Now you're going to separate the juice from it. How much the clarified beet juice? How much blood is actually going to stay in the clarified beet juice? Definitely more than shishim. It's definitely batel b'shishim. Maybe even batel in 200. Yeah, so that's why he is masik that it's mutter mitzad dat. Well, we didn't talk about the shayla. Could you do it? This is all talking about you bought sugar, it was processed with blood, could you eat it? But could you do it? Bitul Isur Lekhatchila. Shayla of Bitul Isur Lekhatchila. And that comes the Shuva Yerdei Siman Samaches and the two short ones right afterwards. In the Reish Pei Hei, Reish Pei Vav that are in the Isofis. Yeah, so just before we go into that, we see that for the mashmos, seems like from the Tzemach Tzedek over here is that if there is no beneficial tam, doesn't give tam l'shvach, or you don't feel there's no taste recognizable in it, l'cha'ira you could say it's batel b'roiv. L'cha'ira you could say it's batel b'roiv, and you got to look at, in such a scenario, you could look at the final product. Don't look at the preliminary product. Because even though the original mixture is less than shishim, you look at the final product. Processing agent, you look at the final product. Now the final product is juice after it's separated from the blood, has a much higher ratio, and it's definitely batel, so it's fine. And Siman Samaches is where he discusses the idea of Bitul Isur Lekhatchila. First, he starts by saying, if you don't have in mind to be mevatel, we know that's mutter. Over here, it's clear that the person who put the blood into the sugar had no intention to mevatel the blood and use the blood to eat the blood afterwards. That was not his kavanah. More so, he doesn't want the blood there. His whole kavanah is other. He wants to clarify. He wants to take the juice, the beet juice, separate, make it clear, and they should be able to use it for sugar. So the chayra, it's mutter. However, over here, you're doing it with your hands, and psik reishe. Yes, it's true that you're not interested in it, and your kavanah is other, but you have psik reishe. There's no other way around it. You're doing it with your hands. So he says that it's not an issue of psik reishe. Why? Because maybe there's not going to be anything left. After the whole processing, if you separate it properly, you might not end up with any blood in the sugar. So there's no psik reishe that for sure is going to be that blood is going to remain in the sugar and become batel. It's only that it's a possibility.
How high is the possibility?
Very high. If you properly do it, then it's high. If you don't know what you're doing, then you have a problem. Nobody wants to sell red sugar. Pink sugar. The only way to sell pink sugar is when they do it for cookies and cakes, but they take white sugar and they add coloring to it. They don't mix blood in processing and leave the blood inside to sprinkle on your cakes. Next point, the sugar really becomes a new creation, which we discussed in the previous sermon. There's no bitul isur. It's a new creation that comes out of this mixture. So the chayra, even the yid is able to do it. And you can't say that you can't compare it to every other case of bitul isur where you put something asur into it and you do it, because by a regular bitul isur there is a possibility, there is a possibility that you could be able to cook these potatoes without putting any treif into it. Over here, there is no other way to do it. What we saw from the Taz. Because there's no other way, no other processing agent in those days to be able to get to it, to get to this result, you have to do it. More so, if aside for Yev Shabei Fenacher, you don't have any kavanah to be mevatel the Isser. And in such a scenario, it's mutter, even if it's a psik reishe. Why? Not every case is like that. Because over here, this would be a derabanan, and it's a psik reishe that lo nichalei, you're not interested in the blood, then it's mutter. So it means it's a psik reishe, suffix psik reishe, plus in a derabanan, plus lo nichalei. Why is lo nichalei? Simple reason, he does not want any blood left in the sugar. He would prefer if he would have a way that there should be 0.000 blood left in the sugar, he would be even happier. The blood makes the sugar worse. It ruins it. You can't sell it as beautiful as it is. So that's why it is mutter. So over here, it's not only Eina Miskavan Levatel.
Why is there one? Why is there one?
Dam, that's the 60 by blood. The Rabban. So over here in this tshuva, the point is when you want to do bitul isur, if you're not miskavan to mevatel isur, more so, your kavana is that you b'chal don't want it to remain there. It's not like in the case of the Tataz brings that you want to be mevatel, but your kavana is to achieve a different result. Over here, not only is your kavana to achieve a different result, also you're not interested in the result being the blood remaining there. You're interested in the result being that the blood is not going to be there anymore. The processing agent should do its work and leave. That's his ultimate goal. So then it's not a problem, especially because he have shabei fenach. Now, Siman Reish Pei Hey, Reish Pei Vav are two short ones regarding the same topic. This is the next page in your booklet. And over there, he also discusses the same sugar question. He says, first in Reish Pei Hey, the Yesod of the heter is being all sugar is made this way. So every kol heter nasekach, every single kosher sugar is made this way. So being that that's the case, you can't tell a Yid he's not allowed to do it. When they will be able to buy the same exact thing, what they will buy from the goy will be the same exact product. They're not going to be able to buy from the goy bloodless sugar. They'll be able to buy from the goy sugar that was processed with blood. So they could buy the same thing from a Yid. And why is that? Because in Shar Isur, why you're not allowed to do Bitul is L'Chatchila Mishum De'efshur L'Hasik Dover Heter Mamash, because you have the option of purchasing the same product, of getting the same product, Dover Heter Mamash, without this. But over here you don't have it. And he says that's one point. Every kind of heter is done in this scenario, so the idea of Bitul is L'Chatchila doesn't apply. When every form to achieve this result is done this way. And more so, comes with another idea. Ein hatzibur yecholim lamod mibli le'echel zucker. It's impossible. You have a problem. The world can't survive without sugar. So that's a next level of yefshar b'ofen acher. It's not that you can't process the sugar. So you can't live without sugar. If you can't live without sugar, we got to figure out how to do it. So once you could figure out how to do it, then the Yid could also do it. And it's fine. Therefore, he says, even the L'Chatchila you could do it. So now we come up with another idea from the Tzemach Tzedek. Sometimes when you have what we call primary products that you can survive without, sometimes you are able to, and you can't do it any other way, you could be mekel in the Bitul Isur L'Chatchila, obviously with all the conditions of Bitul Isur L'Chatchila, but it gives you, that's another angle to be matter. The question is, how do you define what could the world not survive without? It's interesting that there's a time that the Eida Chreidis doesn't give Hechshelim on Pesach, only on things that they feel are Eichel Nefesh. You can't survive without. So they don't give on Coke. They could give on Coke and Pesach, they let somebody else do it. Why? You can survive without Coke. But at the time they didn't give kashrus on chocolate either. They didn't get help in the chocolate you could live without. But about 10 years ago they changed their attitude and they put chocolate, they started being kosher Pesach chocolate with Eida Chreidis. But up until then there was no kosher Pesach chocolate with Eida Chreidis. There was cocoa, there was sugar, there was salt, there was oil, there was things like that, but there was no chocolate. Chocolate bars were not available for Pesach and Eida Chreidis. They would let a different hechsher take over them for Pesach. So you have this concept of things that you can't live without. Siman Reish Pei Vav, it's the same ideas again. He says that over there also, in the first paragraph, first two paragraphs, the Machzedek concludes in the beginning of the tshuva, it's a short tshuva, that really if you're able to get the company to use less blood so it should become batel, try to do that. But even without it, but that's just for the issue of the taste. But it doesn't solve bitul לכתחילה. It's bitul לכתחילה. He says there's a few reasons why not. First of all, we already saw every sugar is made this way, except for one place he mentions. I don't have it in front of me. So I think Riga. What does he say over there? Anybody has it in front of them? In Reish Pei Vav, in the last paragraph, he says over there which city they do it without blood. It's one place he says they do it without blood. Or the second to last paragraph. I think it's Riga. If someone brings it to me, I'll see it. It's Riga?
Yeah.
Yeah. Over there they figure out how to do it without, because they used to base it on honey. They would do it from honey, they would process sugar from honey, so they were able to do it without blood, or much less blood. But otherwise, every other sugar is done that way. Second of all, again, the same idea. The majority of the crowd can survive without sugar. You got to figure out a way to do it. The dam itself is batel. He doesn't go into all the details, but we already know from Simon Samach Zayin how the dam is batel, either because it doesn't give taste, or it's batel b'roiv, or if you taste it, you're not going to see any remainder of the blood. And the last thing is, ultimately, the Jews are going to anyways buy it from the goyim. If you're not going to eat, you're going to do it. So for Israel, it's also mutter to do it. That is all by you doing it. Now there's one more topic which is relevant to bitul לכתחילה, which you have towards the end of the booklet, which that is a goy allowed to be mevatel isur for you? So I brought the first two sources in that. I brought you Imre Bine, and I brought you a Darkei Tshuva. The Imre Bine seems to take the approach as follows. He brings that some people are b'chlal isur. If a goy is mevatel, even if it's mevatel by a goy, it's also. From the Ramo, it's mashma that it's mutter if a goy did it. The question is, when is it mutter? The Tshuva Maram Lublin, that's mashma that it's mutter, and the Pri Megadim brings it, but the Pri Megadim himself says that it only applies if you, the Yid, did not tell the goy to be mevatel it. And the Yid, and the goy is not doing it for the Yid. How he got it out of the Maram Lublin, I don't know, but when the Maram is mashma faket, but that's how the Pri Megadim understands, Pri Megadim paskins. When a goy does it for the Yid, it's also. From the Rashba, it's mashmat, when a goy does it for the Yid, even by the Eved, it's also. And then even brings another shitta, that not only if the goy does everything for you, if the goy adds for you, he makes a production for goyim, he adds extra for the Yid, and he's mevatel. Isur in that one, like he's doing for the goyim, it's also asur. It's also nechshav that he's doing it for him. So the Imre Bino seems to take the approach, any way that the goy is going to do it for the Yid, whether the Yid tells him to do it, that's for sure is a problem. Or the Yid doesn't tell him to do it. He's doing it on behalf of the Jew, he's adding for the Jew, it's all asur. Darkei Tshuva explains all those sources in a different way. Explains that Ashbash, if the goy does it from himself, you're allowed to buy from him. It's not considered לכתחילה. B'chlal, the Darkei Tshuva takes the approach and he explains, and he also even brings it from the Chasam Sofer and the Teres Chesed and a whole list of other people. Buying is not mevatel isur לכתחילה. If a goy did it, even if a goy did it for you, it's not considered mevatel isur לכתחילה. Buying is not considered לכתחילה. לכתחילה means that a goy came to your house and you asked him, please throw this teaspoon of butter into my cholent. That's bitul isur לכתחילה that a goy does for you. But if a guy does it in his store or in his factory, even if it's done for you, seems like he explains that it seems like it's not a problem. As long as the Yid does not tell the guy specifically, go ahead and do this for me. Now, what's the logic behind this? When a guy is doing, let's go like this. If a guy does for a Yid, and the guy does it within in the Yid tells him and the Yid gives him the products, then everybody holds it's osur. If the Yid tells him to do it for him, also almost everybody holds it's osur. If a guy adds from his own intention for a Jew made an order and he adds for the Yid extra and does bitul, and the Yid knows about it and it's for him, or the Yid knows about it, or it's done specifically for the Jew, that's where the disagreement is, how to understand the Maram Lublin, this Pashas Maram Lublin, that's like a tshuva takes it, is that it's mutter to buy from him. The Imre Bina seems to say it's asur. Some people are matir b'chlal any form of purchasing if it was not done for you, specifically done upon your request. Some people are machmir in it. What's the logic behind it? The logic behind it is simple. If a guy is doing it for himself, he's sitting in his factory, he has a goyim as clients, and he's there and he's makes his recipe for his candies and for his cookies, throws in some chazer fat into it, and it happens to be it's batal b'shishim, batal b'meya, batal b'elef, whatever it is. Or maybe it's not batal. He intentionally puts it in there. His intention is not to be mevatel isur. His clientele is not looking for bitul isur. His clientele is looking to eat. So he's putting it in there because that's the thing. There's no kavanah to mevatel isur. When a guy does it for a Yid, his kavanah is to mevatel isur for the Jew. So the people who are machmir, today it's accepted to be machmir, is because the guy is doing it for you. He's mevatel isur for the Yid. So if a factory does cookies and they have a bitul isur, the majority of their clients, they don't consider the Jewish market, then it's not a problem. If they're doing a specific run for Yidden, even though it's owned by Goyim, it's asur. If they add, according to some shittas, it's asur. If the Yid didn't ask them, if the Yid asked them, it's for sure asur. If the Yid didn't ask them, but they do it for the Jewish run, it's asur. If they add for the Jewish consumers, it's also asur. Why is that? Because when they're doing it, they're having in mind, they know it's asur. Told them it's asur to eat this product. If it's batal, they're doing it to be mevatel isur for your sake. So come to Chashayla, what happens is, if it's done, the factory does it for Goyim and Yidden just happen to buy, it's fine. Factory does it for Yidden and it runs for Yidden, it's for sure asur. Factory doesn't ask for Yidden, it's also l'chayra. It seems like it's asur. Now, what happens? We know that a mumar is like a goy. Right? So what happens, you have a mumar, Lavid Zara became a Christian, or mumar l'chal Shabbos is b'mezid, not somebody who doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't know. When he has a factory, he makes cookies for Goyim. He owns a factory, makes cookies for Goyim. Mevatel isur. Is it considered that the Yid is doing it, it's asur for the Yiddish clientele or not? If he's adding for the Yidden, there'll be a problem. If he's doing it for the Goyim, it makes sense to say that's not a problem. Right? That's what it seems like. Because he has, has no kavanah to be oiser, and if you're going to make a mumar into goy l'chol d'vreim, this is also included in it. I did see somebody who wrote like that, now I don't remember who it was now. Okay, say that. We will be mamshich. Hold on one second.